Ben Houchen, great to see you. Thanks for joining us on GB News. What would you say to your political opponents who say the Conservatives' levelling up policy is just a slogan?
I'd tell them to come to Teesside and see what we're starting to do on the levelling up agenda, whether that's things around the green industrial revolution with CCUS and hydrogen and offshore wind, whether it's the transport infrastructure that we've seen, the UK's largest free port. There's a huge start going on in Teesside. What I would say to them, and as I've been saying to the government, we need to make sure we can replicate what's happening in Teesside across the rest of the levelling up areas.
Some say that free ports were possible within the European Union. What makes the UK's post-Brexit free ports different?
I mean, fundamentally, that's just not true. And anybody who can scrutinise any of the free ports across the European Union within 2 seconds will see that actually what you have in the EU are glorified bonded warehouses. They're basically large sheds that store product. It means they don't have to pay certain taxes for a period of time and then they move them out. What we're talking about, like in Teesside, is 4,500 acres of land. We're talking about manufacturing processes, importing raw materials with no customs, manufacturing them in a low tax base where you're not paying business rates or employers' national insurance contributions. You're adding value in a high-skilled economy, being able to compete with places like the Far East and then re-export across the world. That is very different to what's happening in the EU, and it's very different to what's happening actually across large parts of the world. So it's like comparing our apples and oranges. It's just not the same thing.
One of the big developments on Teesside is the big GE investment in a wind turbine factory. When might that be up and running?
Well, we're starting construction actually in the next 4 weeks, so we're going to start to see piles going in the ground, steel coming out of the ground, steel coming from British Steel, literally a few hundred yards away from where the factory is going to be built, supporting 700 jobs in Teesside, and that's going to be operational in April 2023 because they want to start exporting those blades to what will be the world's largest wind farm just 80 miles off the Redcar coastline. So
that's at Dogger Bank. That's a joint UK-Norwegian project, right?
Yes, absolutely, and it helps towards the government's target for 40 gigawatts of offshore wind. And we're seeing, 2,000 jobs at the GE factory being created, local workers creating the green industrial revolution, and it going out to the world's largest wind farm. And all of that's happening on Teesside. And like I say, spades in the ground in the next 4 weeks, and the actual factory will be operational April 23.
Now, you're not an MP, given that you're Tees Valley Mayor, Ben, but you obviously have very close links to Westminster. There is some discontent on the government's backbenches, isn't there? You've got Jake Berry, the Northern Research Group of MPs. They know that their future parliamentary seats depend on delivery of this levelling up agenda. Do you understand some of their frustration?
I mean, I've been pushing the Prime Minister this week, and I've talked publicly about it for a long, long time, that actually we need to deliver up on the levelling up agenda. That's the thing that this government is going to be assessed on come the next general election, and we need to be able to show demonstrable progress towards it. Now, in the defence of the Prime Minister, we've just been through a global pandemic for the last 2 years. It's difficult to concentrate on other domestic policy forums, but now, hopefully, we're through the back of COVID, we're back through the pandemic. We really need to supercharge what levelling up should be, because by the time of the next election, we need to see those spades in the ground, and people in places like Teesside or Stoke or Bolton and other places that voted Conservative for the first time ever, we need to be able to point to things and show a demonstrably positive difference in those people's lives. Because I'm a big believer, and I was speaking to Jake Berry about this the other day, I'm a big believer that people who voted Conservative want to vote Conservative again. They want to be proven right.
The people who lent you their votes, in the Prime Minister's phrase,
absolutely,
in December 2019.
Because they are lent votes, but people want to be proven right. They want to vote for us again. We need to give them that excuse. Levelling up is that excuse, but we need to make more progress with it now we're out the other side of COVID.
Tees Valley's doing very well. You've used your personal authority to attract investment. You obviously know the Chancellor well. Part of the Treasury's campus is moving to the famous railway town of Darlington, and good for Darlington. But there are other parts of the country that feel levelling up isn't happening for them. I think one particular issue is transport. You've been a big advocate of Northern Powerhouse Rail right across the north of England from west to east. It's still a long way off, isn't it?
It is a long way off. So absolutely the government should be backing Northern Powerhouse Rail, and we're hearing rumours. I don't know any more than you do, but hopefully they do come out and the Prime Minister does back Northern Powerhouse Rail in a very significant way. But that's, if you even take the timelines from Northern leaders like myself and Andy Burnham and others, to get that complete and up and running, you're talking about the early 2040s. That's 20 years away. We can't wait until 2040 to upgrade the transport connectivity in the north of England. So that needs to be paired with quick wins. So there's local transport priorities around buses, train stations, better train connectivity within local regions, better road connectivity, because I don't think anybody's going to get rid of the car no matter what some of the climate extremists might like us to do. So how do we pair those quick wins that demonstrates levelling up, that gives the government the goodwill and the credibility to make that long-term view of Northern Powerhouse Rail come to fruition?
I know you've got a lot of respect for Andy Burnham. We've discussed this in the past, your Labour counterpart in this great city of Manchester. Should Labour appoint Andy Burnham as their leader? Do you think the Tories would fear a Labour Party led by Andy Burnham?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Andy is doing a reasonable job as Great Manchester Mayor. I mean, he's tried and failed a couple of times already, but ultimately, we've just got to concentrate on what we do best. And it's what we do in Teesside, right? Forget the Labour Party. They're nowhere near power. I keep saying, everybody talked about Keir Starmer's reset at the party conference last week. I guarantee you, in 3 weeks' time, the only thing that people remember about the Labour conference is that Keir Starmer wants a female James Bond. That's how little impact and cut-through it has had with people. Now, Andy will say whatever.
Liz Truss says she's not available.
No, she's not. She's not. But you know what? We've got Anne-Marie, we've got Priti Patel.
Priti Patel as Bond.
Maybe Rishi Sunak. Rishi Sunak could be the next James Bond. I mean, that would be a good idea. But I mean, it doesn't really matter. I mean, whether it's Andy Burnham, whether it's Keir Starmer, or whether it's somebody else, the Labour Party, where they are as an entirety, are in such a mess. They're nowhere near power. But as I keep warning the Conservative Party, we can't just rely on the mess that the Labour Party are in. We've got to demonstrate why people voted for us and continue with the progress that we've started.
To what extent does your party need to be worried about losing its reputation as the low-tax party? The tax burden now is the highest it's been since the Second World War. There is quite a lot of discontent among delegates and backbenchers here on precisely that question.
Well, it's a difficult thing being the Prime Minister and Chancellor. We've got to balance the books. I mean, it's a Conservative thing to make sure that we manage the public finances appropriately. But I'm on record as saying that I don't think the national insurance increase was the right thing to do. I think actually, as we're coming out of COVID, we're releasing the potential of businesses across the country and new businesses coming to our shores. Do we want to overburden them and make it more difficult for them to get going again with a higher tax burden? Actually, we should be looking at reducing taxes, because we've seen in the past, haven't we, where you reduce the tax burden on businesses, actually the tax take to the exchequer is higher, it funds public services, and that's what we want. So we've got to get that balance right. But again, I am in agreement with a lot of Conservatives across this conference that we shouldn't be increasing the tax burden on hard-working people as we come out of this COVID crisis.
Your part of the UK, the North East, of course, it has a tremendous industrial heritage. It's a major exporting region of the UK, but it's also one of the poorest regions, with all respect. How worried are people in the North East about these cost of living rises that are clearly coming down the track?
Well, everybody's concerned. We're concerned about the cost of energy. We're concerned about how much it costs to fill our car up with petrol. We're concerned about actually our jobs. And a big part of that is about raising aspirations and raising opportunities for people. The more investment we can attract, the better paid, high-wage jobs that we want, the more money in people's pockets, and that helps to rejuvenate high streets. It gives people more choices, and that makes everybody's life easier. That's what we're about. I mean, you take the Tees Valley. Average wage in the Tees Valley is £24,000 a year. The national average is 31. My aspiration for Teesside is we want to exceed the national average. That means that people have prosperity. That means they have opportunity, not just for themselves, but future generations. And that is always at the heart of what I do, and I know it's at the heart of what this Prime Minister wants to deliver.
Ben Houchen, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.